We need to streamline operations, Alex. Your position is being eliminated. My name is Alex Chun, 36 years old, senior product developer at Nexus Innovations for the past 8 years, until about 15 minutes ago. Marcus didn't even look me in the eye when he said it, just stared at the spreadsheet on his tablet, while HR Director Patricia nodded sympathetically from the corner. Not in his office, not with any warning. Right there in the conference room where I just finished presenting the final prototype of my medical data algorithm. The same algorithm that would later be valued at $28 million. I closed my laptop, straightened my notes, and simply said, I understand. No argument, no pleading, no scene. Just quiet acknowledgement as 15 co-workers avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their coffee cups or meeting notes. I cleared my desk methodically. 31 minutes flat. 1 cardboard box for personal items. Framed engineering degree. Ceramic mug my niece made. Small wooden puzzle box I used to think through coding problems. Another box of the notebooks I kept over 8 years. Project sketches, meeting notes. The original concepts for what I call the MedSync protocol scribbled on graph paper 3 years ago. The backbone of everything that followed. The innovation Marcus had spent the last 6 months maneuvering to control. Alex, this is just business, nothing personal, Marcus said, appearing in my doorway as security waited to escort me out. His voice softer now that we were alone. Same tone he used when asking about families during holiday parties. The company's moving in a new direction, focusing on practical applications rather than theoretical algorithms. I kept packing, not trusting myself to respond. The MedSync protocol wasn't theoretical. We both knew it worked. The successful hospital trial last month proved it. Reduced diagnostic errors by 64%. Flagged critical drug interactions others missed. Predicted treatment outcomes with 87% accuracy. Real results, real lives improved. Real value. I didn't bother explaining that the theoretical algorithm had already attracted interest from 3 major healthcare systems. Kaiser Permanente's Innovation Division had emailed twice last week asking for meetings that I'd worked nights and weekends for 3 years, testing, refining, documenting every breakthrough. Marcus wouldn't care. He'd already rebranded my work as Project Helios in last week's executive briefing. My name nowhere in the presentation. My contribution reduced to initial research. I shook hands with my team on the way out. Wished them success. I meant it. Good people who deserve better than what was coming. Ryan from engineering walked me to my car. Awkward silence between us until he finally spoke. This is bullshit, Alex. Everyone knows MedSync is your baby. Marcus couldn't explain the core algorithm if his life depended on it. I shrugged, loading boxes into my trunk. It's fine. These things happen. It wasn't fine, but I wasn't going to make Ryan uncomfortable with the truth. He still had a job to protect. In my car, I sat for a moment, looking back at the glass and steel building where I'd spent most of my 30s. The security badge I just surrendered had been renewed 7 times. I started the engine and drove to the beach, parked facing Pacific. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Congratulations on your freedom, I muttered to myself, watching waves break on the shore. I knew what would happen next. I'd seen this movie before. The first hints were already there in Marcus's recent behavior. The closed-door meetings with legal. The sudden interest in documentation processes. The new NDA he'd insisted everyone sign last month. Unnecessarily broad, unusually restrictive. What he didn't know was that every piece of MedSync's development existed outside Nexus' systems. Every breakthrough, every test result, every line of code documented meticulously in my private repositories. There was no company transition plan because nobody had asked for one, and now nobody ever would. I joined Nexus when they were a mid-tier healthcare software provider struggling to break into advanced analytics. Their product line was solid but conventional. Medical billing systems, basic clinical documentation tools, nothing revolutionary. The founder, Dr. Eleanor Wright, was a visionary with medical expertise, but needed technical innovators to execute her ideas. I need someone who can see the future of healthcare data, she'd told me during my interview. Someone who understands both code and clinical needs. Make something transformative and we'll both succeed. After 4 years developing their standard offerings, I began exploring what would become MedSync. The concept was ambitious, a system that could integrate fragmented medical data from disparate sources, identify patterns human clinicians might miss, and generate insights that improve diagnosis and treatment, not replacing doctors, but making them exponentially more effective. Eleanor loved it, allocated resources, gave me space to build a specialized team. Then Eleanor retired last year. The board brought in Marcus Johnson from a competitor, MBA from Wharton, resume full of successful restructurings and strategic pivots. He wore custom suits, used phrases like synergistic healthcare solutions, and had never once sat with actual clinicians to understand their workflow challenges. The first red flag appeared 3 months into Marcus's tenure. He canceled my scheduled presentation to potential hospital partners, calling it premature market engagement. The second came when he reassigned 2 key engineers from my team to other projects. Resource optimization, he explained. The third was overhearing him tell investors that Nexus was developing proprietary diagnostic prediction technology without mentioning my name or the years of work already completed. I could have fought harder, could have gone to the board, could have explained that Marcus was undermining the most valuable innovation in the company's pipeline. But I recognized the pattern. New executive determined to make his mark by claiming ownership of promising projects. So I started making contingencies, working from home more often, using my personal equipment for critical development, documenting everything meticulously with timestamps and witnesses, creating backup plans for the inevitable. When it came, the only surprise was how quickly Marcus moved after the successful hospital trial. Success made MedSync too valuable to share credit for. I wasn't just being sidelined, I was being erased. 2 days after my firing, Ryan called. "Alex, things are weird here. Marcus has everyone signing additional confidentiality statements, specifically about Project Helios. IT confiscated all your team's notes. Legal's involved in everything." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "They're scrambling to understand your code architecture. Nobody can figure out how the prediction module interfaces with the identification algorithm. The documentation they have is incomplete." I smiled slightly. The documentation wasn't incomplete. It was precisely as comprehensive as my employment agreement required. The elegant connections between modules, the proprietary weighting system for clinical factors, the adaptive learning protocols, those existed primarily in my private development environment and in my head. "That's unfortunate," I said finally. "Hope they figured out." "Alex, this is your life's work. Aren't you angry? Aren't you going to fight this?" I looked down at my laptop, at the email I'd received that morning from Dr. Kavita Patel at the University Hospital Innovation Incubator. Subject line: "Interested in discussing your predictive healthcare analytics approach." I closed the screen before answering Ryan. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm already focused on what's next." That evening, I received my first email from Marcus since the firing. Subject line: "Consulting opportunity." The message was brief and carefully worded. "Alex, there may be an opportunity for you to provide transitional consulting on Project Helios. The team has encountered some integration challenges that your expertise could help address. Compensation would be generous. Let me know your availability to discuss." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to meet with Eliza Watson, a patent attorney recommended by a former colleague. Her office was small but elegant, walls lined with framed patents she'd successfully secured. "Walk me through your situation," she said after introductions. For the next hour, I explained everything: MedSync's development, my documentation process, Marcus's gradual takeover, my termination. I showed her my private development logs, the original concept papers, the email threads with early testers. Then I revealed my secret advantage. 3 months ago, I filed a provisional patent application covering MedSync's core innovation. I said, sliding a folder across her desk. Filed as an individual inventor, not through Nexus. Eliza raised an eyebrow. "And your employment agreement?" "Allows for independent intellectual property development. provided it's done on personal time and equipment without company resources. I was careful, very careful. She reviewed the patent application, flipping through pages of technical specifications and architectural diagrams. This is unusually thorough for provisional, she noted. Most people file bare-bones applications. I nodded. I wanted it bulletproof. What about your work computer? Phone? Did you use company equipment for any of this? No. Separate personal devices for all MedSync core development. The work I did at Nexus was implementation and integration testing only. The heart of the innovation, the prediction engine and diagnostic correlation system, was developed entirely on my own time, my own equipment, documented meticulously every step. Eliza leaned back in her chair. And you need me because Marcus is going to claim corporate ownership of everything. I need someone who understands the intersection of intellectual property and employment law. Someone who can help me protect what's mine while navigating what comes next. She studied me for a moment. Most people in your situation come in emotional, angry, wanting revenge. You seem calculated. I smiled slightly. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in justice, and in seeing MedSync reach its full potential. Fair enough, she said, reaching for her keyboard. Let's discuss strategy. By the following week, Marcus had escalated to daily emails, each more urgent than the last. The final prototype I demonstrated wasn't functioning correctly. The hospital partnership was questioning results. The engineering team couldn't replicate key features. My phone began buzzing with calls from unknown numbers, board members I suspected, finally realizing what they'd lost. I focused instead on my meetings with Dr. Patel and her team at University Hospital's Innovation Center. Their understanding of clinical needs matched perfectly with MedSync's capabilities. Their questions were insightful, focused on patient outcomes rather than profit margins. This was how healthcare technology should be developed. Doctors and engineers in partnership, not MBAs dictating requirements based on market projections. Meanwhile, Eliza was methodically building our case. She'd filed to convert my provisional patent to a full application, expedited timeline. She'd documented the timeline of my independent development with affidavits from former colleagues who'd witnessed early conceptual work. She prepared cease and desist letters ready to send the moment Nexus attempted to commercialize anything resembling MedSync. 3 weeks after my firing, the first industry rumors began circulating. Nexus's promising new diagnostic platform was facing technical challenges. The hospital trial results couldn't be replicated. The company's stock dropped 8% in a single day. I felt no satisfaction, only certainty that the technology I'd spent years perfecting couldn't simply be appropriated and mass-produced without its creator. On Monday morning, my phone rang. Eleanor Wright, Nexus's founder, calling from retirement. Alex, what the hell is happening? The board just called an emergency session. Marcus is claiming technical sabotage. Says you deliberately left the system crippled. That's not possible. I replied calmly. Everything I built at Nexus works exactly as demonstrated, all properly documented according to company standards. But not the whole system, Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. She'd always been perceptive. The implementation at Nexus was a carefully controlled application of the core technology, the heart of MedSync, the predictive engine, the learning algorithms. Those were developed independently. My personal intellectual property, as clearly outlined in my employment agreement that you yourself approved. Silence for a moment, then a soft chuckle. Always the careful engineer, even with contracts. More silence. The board is panicking. The Kaiser deal is falling apart. Marcus is throwing around legal threats. Let him, I said. My documentation is meticulous. My position is solid. What do you want, Alex? Money? Your job back? I considered the question. I want MedSync to help patients. That's always been the goal. If Nexus wants to be part of that future, they need to understand what they're dealing with. Not stolen property they can claim, but an innovation they need to license properly from its creator. I'll relay that message, Eleanor said, then paused. For what it's worth, bringing in Marcus was the board's decision, not mine. I would have handled things differently. I know, I said. That's why I'm taking your call. 2 days later, Eliza forwarded me an email from Nexus's general counsel requesting an urgent meeting to discuss intellectual property concerns. The aggressive tone suggested they'd realized their vulnerability, but weren't yet ready to concede. Perfect. Meanwhile, my discussions with University Hospital had progressed to specific implementation plans. Their chief of medicine was particularly excited about MedSync's potential for reducing diagnostic errors in complex cases. This could transform how we practice medicine, he'd said during our last meeting. When can we start testing? Soon, I promised. There are some legal matters to resolve first. What I didn't tell him was that 3 other major healthcare systems had also reached out, having heard industry rumors about the algorithm Nexus couldn't control. Interest was growing. Options were multiplying. The meeting with Nexus was scheduled for Thursday morning at Eliza's office, neutral ground. I arrived 30 minutes early, reviewed our documentation one final time, and centered myself. This wasn't about emotion. This wasn't about Marcus. This was about securing MedSync's future and my rightful place as its creator. Marcus arrived with Patricia from HR and 2 attorneys. His usual confidence visibly shaken, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Gone was the expensive suit, replaced by more casual attire, a calculated attempt to seem approachable, I suspected. He extended his hand. I shook it briefly, professionally. "Thanks for meeting, Alex," he began, fake warmth in his voice. "I think there's been a serious misunderstanding that we need to clear up." Eliza gestured to the conference table. "Let's all sit down and clarify exactly where things stand." The atmosphere in the conference room was tense as Marcus's lead attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Diane, opened a folder and placed a document in front of me. "This is your employment agreement, highlighting the intellectual property clauses. All innovations developed during your tenure belong to Nexus." Her tone was clipped, certain, rehearsed. Eliza smiled slightly. "You highlighted section 7.2, but you seem to have overlooked 7.4. She slid her own copy across the table. "Alex's agreement specifically allows for independent intellectual property development, provided it occurs on personal time using personal resources, without company equipment." Marcus leaned forward. "MedSync was developed at Nexus, on Nexus time, using Nexus resources. We have records of Alex accessing our servers throughout development. You have records of me implementing and testing specific applications of core technology." I replied calmly. "The fundamental innovation, the prediction engine and correlation system that make MedSync actually work, was developed independently over 3 years. I have meticulous documentation proving this." Eliza opened her laptop and turned it toward them. Alex maintained separate development environments, personal equipment, timestamp commits, witness statements from colleagues who saw early work predating Nexus implementation. Plus, there's this. She pulled out my patent application, filed 3 months ago as sole inventor. The color drained from Marcus's face as he scanned the document, recognition dawning that the patent covered exactly what made MedSync revolutionary. The other attorney whispered something in his ear. Patricia from HR stared at her notepad, avoiding eye contact. "Even if there's some independent development," Marcus said carefully, "the implementation at Nexus Incorporated Company resources, company data. That creates ownership rights. Implementation, yes. Core innovation, no," Eliza countered. "And we're happy to discuss appropriate licensing terms for Nexus to continue using Alex's proprietary technology. That's why we're here, after all." Marcus's jaw tightened. "The board won't accept this characterization. We're prepared to pursue all legal remedies available." I had stayed silent, watching the corporate defense mechanism activate. Threats, intimidation, promises of lengthy battles. Now I spoke, voice even. "Before you commit to that path, there's something else you should know." I reached for my phone, opened my email, and slid it toward Marcus. "I've received interest from 4 major healthcare systems in the past week alone. They're eager to implement the complete MedSync system, not the partial version Nexus has been struggling with since my departure. You've been soliciting our clients?" His voice rose sharply, control slipping. Not at all. They reached out to me. Industry news travels fast, Marcus. Especially news about promising technologies suddenly facing technical challenges after their creator is unexpectedly terminated. The second attorney, who had been quietly assessing the situation, finally spoke. Perhaps we should discuss terms that would benefit both parties. Smart man, recognizing the weakening position. What followed was 4 hours of negotiation. Proposals, counterproposals, calculated silences. By late afternoon, the framework emerged. I would retain patent ownership and creator recognition. Nexus would receive a non-exclusive license to implement MedSync, with appropriate royalties. I would provide limited transition consultation to ensure the hospital trial continued successfully. Both sides would issue mutually approved statements about an amicable resolution focusing on patient benefits. As we wrapped up, Marcus pulled me aside while the attorneys finalized documentation. You planned this from the beginning, he said. Not quite a question. I looked at him directly. No, Marcus. You created this situation when you decided my innovation could be separated from its creator. When you thought you could simply take credit for years of my work without consequences. It wasn't personal, he insisted. Just business strategy. The best innovations aren't just business strategies, I replied. They're extensions of their creator's vision. MedSync works because I understood both the technical architecture and the clinical needs it addresses. You can't separate those elements and expect the same results. He nodded slowly, finally understanding what his MBA hadn't taught him. That true innovation isn't just intellectual property to be acquired and exploited. It's living knowledge embodied in its creators. The final agreement was signed the following week. The board wasn't happy with Marcus's handling of the situation, particularly after learning he'd misrepresented my role in MedSync's development during executive presentations. His strategic vision suddenly looked more like attempted appropriation of another's work. 3 months later, he was quietly replaced. Sometimes consequences arrive on their own schedule. As for me, I launched MedHealth Analytics with seed funding from University Hospital's Innovation Fund. Our first product, an expanded version of MedSync with enhanced clinical applications, began trials at 6 major medical centers within months. News coverage called it a breakthrough in algorithmic diagnostics. Medical journals published studies documenting improved outcomes. None mentioned the complicated birth of the technology, the attempted corporate theft, the behind-the-scenes battle. That wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that my creation was reaching patients, doing exactly what I designed it to do, improving care, saving lives, transforming how clinicians process complex medical information. Nexus became just one of several implementation partners, reduced from would-be owner to licensee. Their version of MedSync remained limited compared to what my team was now building, but it helped. 18 months after my firing, I received an unexpected email from Eleanor Wright, Nexus's retired founder. Saw your keynote at the Healthcare AI Symposium. Remarkable progress. The board finally understands what they nearly lost. Would you consider meeting? I have thoughts on expanding MedSync's reach to underserved communities. We met the following week at a small cafe near her home. Eleanor looked retirement agreeing with her. I won't waste time with apologies for what happened, she said after we ordered. But I would like to discuss partnerships that could extend your work to safety net hospitals, places that normally couldn't afford this level of technology. This was the Eleanor I remembered, always focused on impact rather than profit, on patients rather than shareholders. We spent 2 hours sketching possibilities. By the time we finished, a new initiative was taking shape, a consortium model that would make MedSync accessible to resource-limited healthcare providers through subsidized licensing. You could have destroyed Nexus, Eleanor said as we parted. After what Marcus did, no one would have blamed you. I considered this. That was never the goal. MedSync was always about improving healthcare, not corporate battles. More damage would have just meant fewer patients benefiting. She smiled. That's why you succeeded where Marcus failed. He saw a property to control. You saw a mission to complete. 3 years after that meeting in Marcus's conference room, where my position was eliminated, MedHealth Analytics employed 86 people. Our technology was implemented in over 200 hospitals nationwide. The core patent, my patent, had been cited in 47 subsequent innovations. Industry estimates valued the company at $120 million, with acquisition offers arriving regularly. I declined them all. Some creations shouldn't change hands. The original Nexus implementation, meanwhile, had stagnated after initial deployment. Without ongoing innovation from the original creator, they couldn't extend the platform's capabilities. Their license remained valuable but limited, a permanent reminder of what happens when companies mistake creators for mere employees, innovations for mere assets. I occasionally saw Marcus at industry events. He landed at a smaller competitor, title impressive but influence diminished. We exchanged professional nods, nothing more. No triumph, no gloating. His own actions had determined his path, just as my preparations had preserved mine. What began as a defense against theft had become something more meaningful, proof that innovation protected and properly shepherded could reach its full potential. The algorithm that Marcus thought could simply be taken, rebranded, and exploited had instead grown beyond what even I had initially imagined, not because of corporate resources or market strategy, but because it remained connected to the mind that conceived it. In my office, a modest space despite the company's success, I kept only one memento from my Nexus days, that ceramic mug my niece had made, chipped at the rim from being hastily packed that day. A reminder that endings often contain beginnings, that what seems like loss can become opportunity when met with preparation rather than panic. Last month, a physician from a rural hospital in Arizona emailed me. Yesterday, we diagnosed a rare autoimmune condition using MedSync that would have taken weeks to identify otherwise. The patient will make a full recovery because of the early intervention. Thought you should know. I forwarded it to my team with a simple note. This is why we do what we do. Sometimes, the most powerful response to theft isn't anger or vengeance. It's creation. Building something better than what was taken. Something that fulfills the original vision more completely than would have been possible within constraints that others tried to impose. My $1,000,000 idea had become something more valuable than money. It had become exactly what was meant to be. The surprise waiting for Marcus wasn't just legal preparation or patent protection. It was a realization that true innovation can't be separated from its creator without losing the very essence that makes it revolutionary. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences. Some victories aren't about winning battles, but about ensuring that important work continues despite the battles. 5 years to the day after being escorted from Nexus headquarters, I stood on stage accepting the Healthcare Innovation Impact Award. Looking out at the audience of clinicians, engineers, and yes, healthcare executives, I delivered a simple message. Innovation isn't just intellectual property. It's a living connection between creator and creation. Protect that connection, and you protect the potential of what can be built together. Marcus wasn't in the audience, but I like to think he might have watched the live stream, finally understanding what he'd failed to grasp years earlier. Not every story ends with confrontation. Sometimes, the most satisfying ending is simply becoming what you were meant to be all along, without interruption, without compromise, without anything stolen ever truly being lost.